AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Asaf Somekh. Asaf is the founder and CEO at Iguazio. Asaf, welcome to the show.
Hi, JP. Really happy to be here.
It's our pleasure. Asaf, let's start with yourself. If you could, please give us a background of your journey in technology, where you first got started, some of the interesting roles you've held along the way, taking us up to just before the origins of Iguazio.
At the age of 53, talking about the journey will take a long time, and I don't think we have enough time on this podcast. But let's actually, I think it really starts when I was 13 and I took my first computers course. It was still on a big mainframe with punch cards. That was my first experience. Not that I really enjoyed it back then, but it was the first one. But fast forward later, doing my computer engineering first degree, I think it was the third year when I took my first AI course. And I was amazed. I think definitely out of the 4 years in that degree, that was the best course I've ever taken over there. It was back at the Technion. It, for me, this whole thing of creating a program that behaves was amazing. It was still, I mean, we can't compare it to today's technologies. It wasn't anything close to deep learning and machine learning. It was still heuristical, A-star based AI, but still, they've created the course in a way that we were writing competitive programs that were competing, playing checkers, and you really needed to make your program smart, and that was an amazing experience. So for me, this was somewhere around 1989 or 1990. That was actually the beginning of my AI journey.
Thank you for that, Asaf. We really appreciate it. And it's always good to learn when somebody first got that real passion and interest on a particular area that they subsequently decide to embark on an entrepreneurial career. So talk us through the idea behind Iguazio, where you first decided that you wanted to set up your own business, and more importantly, what Iguazio does for its clients.
Sure. So Iguazio was conceived in the summer of 2014, even before we formally founded it, together with my two co-founders, Yaron and Yaron. We were seeing a kind of a repetitive pattern that enterprises were struggling with. All of us worked together previously in several companies where we were working always closely with enterprises in their most data intensive applications, HPC, financial services, different kind of verticals. But we were seeing a repetitive pattern where people were trying to build new type of application pipelines that really serve the business. Because if you think about it, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, IT was serving the business more or less in after the fact when it comes to data. It was either really operational systems that do A, B, C, and that's it. Or when you talked about analyzing data, it was always something that, kind of the big data warehouses that were with us since the previous century that were analyzing data after the fact. It was always a historical data. And yes, you can make business decisions based on those historical data. But the pattern that we were trying, that we started seeing back 6 years ago, where people really trying to bring AI-based decisions into the business, into the day-to-day business. And it wasn't going well. I mean, the failure rates that we were seeing were very, very high. People, if combine it with technology trends at the time, if you think about 2014, it was the hype days of Hadoop as a technology and the ecosystem around it and the whole players around it. It felt like everything going to be solved by Hadoop, and many enterprises embraced Hadoop, invested a lot in Hadoop, but we saw a huge disconnect because when we were talking with end users and those enterprise customers that were trying to build stuff, we saw how much they were struggling. We saw how many projects never really saw the light of day. At the same time, there were some successes, but those successes were restricted to those big tech giants, the Googles and the Yahoos at the time, and the Netflixes. These guys, with what they call brute force, were solving the problem by putting enough people on the problem, by putting enough resources, and building on their own huge infrastructure to support those applications. But when you were looking already at still huge enterprises that were not those tech giants and were trying to embrace AI for their business, they were failing. They were failing miserably, and there was a lot of AI attempts, but most of them were restricted to POCs and lab exercises. And we felt that there was a huge opportunity. We felt that on one end, many people are trying. There's a lot of business drive toward embracing AI and bringing it to the business. And at the same time, the technology stack was wrong. And when you fast forward a few years later, you could see basically the whole Hadoop ecosystem kind of, I would say, imploding into itself with less and less players active in the space, cost-cutting mergers, and eventually only one player that is left serving that space. I think it really reflects the fact that that technology was being kind of forced on that problem and wasn't really solving it, but rather making it even more complex. And this is when we decided to found Iguazio and come up with a new stack that will serve those use cases, that will serve those applications that need combining data from multiple sources, real-time sources, historical sources, different shapes and sizes of data, mix it all together, cross-correlate, enrich, and then push it into the AI models that are running for the business. But then it doesn't end there, because when you run those AI models, it's about making it scalable. Because the other problem that we saw, that people were building the models, and they thought by completing the work that was done in the lab around the model, they were done. I mean, the rest of it is just details. Get those DevOps guys, they will put it somewhere, it will run. That's it. But there was such a misperception of it, and there's still the work actually starts after the model is created, and there was a big disconnect between the environments of development and production, and that's where we are today. I mean, still, when you look at reports from the analyst firms, and Gartner recently released another report, still there's a huge failure rate, and we're here to change that.
Absolutely, Asaf. I think the problem which you have talked about, which many organizations face regardless of size, is only increasing with the increased number of project failure rates. So we've talked about the problem, and the best business ideas come from identifying a problem and finding a way to solve it. So explain how Iguazio does that. Can you give us some insight into some of the examples of the impact that the Iguazio platform and product has had for clients, from project objective implementation to end result?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with one of my favorite projects that was completed during the the height of the first wave of Corona. That's when we went live with that project. So it's, it was challenging from many perspectives, but it really started in the way I was describing the problem. And I'll give some details. So last year, Samsung invested in Iguazio. And following the investment, I had some meeting with some executives, and one of them was telling me, I was there in Seoul in Korea, and they were telling me, look, we have this project with a customer that has been stuck now for many months. And I believe, listening to your pitch, I believe you guys can help it if this is what you're doing, if it works, right? So 2 weeks later, we achieved that objective. What was happening there? This is a customer. I can't reveal names, but it's a customer, a credit card company that was putting together a location-based real-time recommendation engine. Think about it, where you have a service that when you just complete a purchase, immediately you're getting a coupon to your phone with some discount for a matching product to the product you just purchased at another store, which is walking distance from where you are. That's good. It's a nice shopping experience if you opt in, of course. It's good for the credit card company. It's good for the merchants that are part of the program. And they wanted to make it better for their merchants and for them, of course, right? They were thinking, okay, deep learning is probably the technology to use it, and they were working in the lab for some period. I mean, this is before we even knew this project existed. And their data scientists gathered all the necessary data, came up with a model, delivered quite an amazing model that was demonstrated in the lab to all the executives. They were showing them how, with these sources, they can curate those recommendations. And they even had predictions on the high accuracy of their predictions. And all the executives were excited. They applauded and told them, go ahead, take it to production. And then there was one guy from operations that said, but guys, remember, we have 10 million credit card holders. You need to make this work at scale. It's not just running models one by one like you were showing us now in the lab. And the guy said, sure, we will make it happen. So a few months later, nothing works. Nowhere close to where they needed to be. They had an objective to reach 500 transactions per second, and they were still at the dozens. Someone said, well, deep learning, it goes well with GPUs. 16 GPUs later, still they're at somewhere around 200, nowhere close to the 500 that they needed to get to. That's where we were introduced to the project, and 2 weeks after we were introduced, they already had proven the viability of having an end-to-end application that collects all the necessary data from the different sources and prepares the data in real time and pushes it to the models in real time and runs those models in real time at the rate of 500 transactions per second. And that actually really got the final green light for the project. And I'm happy to say, as I was saying before, that a few months ago, during the first wave of COVID, that customer went live, serving millions of customers using our platform. And once again, it's about bringing AI at scale to the business, making sure that this stuff is enterprise grade, that it's a 24/7 application that collects the data from all the sources, that has the ability to cross-correlate different types of data different speeds, different sizes, streaming, static, SQL, all of that in one place, pushing it and preparing those feature vectors that are feeding the models in real time, and doing it in a parallelized way, in a way that you can actually do it at those hundreds of transactions per second at peak hours. So that for me is one of my favorite projects, because it's really, I mean, the model was done already. They were really happy with it, but they never thought about the production implications and what they need to do around it. And this is our mission. It's about, we call ourselves, Iguazio, bring data science to life. That's what we do. I mean, data science should not stay in the lab. It should actually impact the business. We see many data scientists that are working on projects that eventually don't see the light of day. I mean, in the lab, they know. I mean, they know that they can make the impact, but at the end of the day, because of the infrastructure around the model, because of their system, the ability to collect the data, do things at scale, they're failing. Not because their model wasn't good, it's because their processes around operationalizing the model are not good. And this is where Iguazio helps.
Such a great example because it speaks for itself. It's a business problem, money spent, invested with no results, and Iguazio comes in and immediately has impact. And the impact is clear because it's a model that's been moved into production and having real-time impact. So it's amazing. Hearing you describe the various aspects of what goes on behind the scene, it sounds like a data scientist, an engineer, and machine learning engineer's dream. So can you give us some insight into what the team is like, how you've gone about doing it, the various pieces to the puzzle that bring all this together, and what it's like to be part of the team at Iguazio?
So we have a multidisciplinary team, because at the end of the day, we're building a platform that is a cloud native platform that runs on any cloud and also on-prem I would say even at the bleeding edge of technology in terms of the technology that we need to develop and consume when we roll out our projects to our customers. It's a combination of real-time programming at the deeper data layers. So we have a lot of intellectual property around the data management, around the ability to handle so many types of data at the same time without the need to move around and ETL the data from database to database. That's a lot of the IP is around that. So we have a couple of teams in that area. So a big knowledge base over there. We also have a platform team, but this is where the platform is deployed in a scalable way across many instances, different types of instances. It's running across Kubernetes. And all of that needs to be orchestrated in a way that is enterprise grade, that is a 24/7 supportable application. That's over there. And of course, we have the big data and data science teams that are closer to the application level. This is where we're serving all of these applications and also the life cycle of machine learning from model creation all the way to deploying it at scale, detecting model drifts and concept drifts along the life cycle of a model. I have a great example here. We're working with one of the largest hospitals in the world where, again, COVID-19, right? I mean, it's with us for a while now and is staying for the time being. So, people are trying to cope with it. And we've been working with one of the hospitals that created models during the first wave of COVID. Now that we have a second wave, these models were not up to date because the treatments got different, the demographics of patients is different. So it was a clear way to explain to the doctors, look, you have a model drift. And this is where you need to apply model drifting technologies. So this model continues to evolve as you evolve the treatment, as the pandemic evolves. And this is part of the services that we provide in our platform.
So just to stay on this topic of the various services from the platform, you've given two great examples, which are clearly large scale projects. But could you give us some insight into the various use cases if you were to work with, if you were to speak to any of your peers who are struggling to take algorithms and models into production? Can you give us some insight into the various ways that Iguazio could help?
You know, one of the areas that I was amazed to see how we're making a difference was in financial services and the fight against fraud. And we were talking actually with one of the analysts recently, and he was saying that the levels of fraud are actually rising during Corona days because patterns are changing, behaviors are changing, and what's normal now wasn't normal a year ago, and what's not normal now, was normal a year ago. So all of that is really impacting machine learning. It's quite amazing, and it's impacting. If you talk about fraud specifically, we have an example of a customer. It's a payment company that was dealing with fraud in a way that was more or less, okay, fraud happened, money got lost, fraud was detected. Now we just need to understand how much we lost and what regulators we need to tell something happened. That was their way of dealing with fraud. And as fraud levels were rising, they decided that they have to do something about it, and they wanted to prevent it altogether. And this is where they needed to come up with a higher pace of model development, and more importantly, do it in real time and detect or actually predict that fraud is about to happen and stop it altogether before it happens. So no money is lost and no headache is needed dealing with the regulator. So this is one of the use cases that I felt we made a big impact on the business. Another one is in I mentioned healthcare, where we're working with one of the hospitals now beyond their. I mean, it started with COVID, but it's now going beyond that into turning that hospital from a hospital to a city of health. This is how they're kind of rebranding themselves in a way that it's all AI driven. They're building basically two AI centers. One is a clinical one that is around treatments of patients. And on the other side, all the logistics around the hospital and making the experience of patients, of visitors, of the staff much better and more efficient. And this is, for me, an amazing project we're part in. It's again, one of my favorites. We see in the space of predictive maintenance projects where we're helping people predict problems with their platforms, increasing their levels of service to their customers. And that has been going across verticals, whether it's telcos, whether it's tech or manufacturing. We see it across the board. And of course, the space of retail and recommendation engines and churn prevention. In the space of churn, we realize that in many verticals, churn is happening on the first day when you bring in new customers. And typically, the way people deal with churn these days is, again, after the facts. And just like, we were talking at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about how data warehouses were providing information of stuff that happened, analyzing the history, analyzing what happened a few days ago. And if you are using data warehouses to analyze your churn and act upon it, and the picture you're getting about churn is what happened a week ago, even 3 days ago, there's no way you can do anything about customers that are churning on the
Yeah.
first day they're going into a new service. So what we have done with a few customers already, we allowed them to act upon churn as it's happening, predicting churn before it happens, and providing some benefits to that customer as if they're at that junction that they may leave that service on their first interaction. And we've been very successful. I would say our platform has been very successful for those customers, and their returns are amazing. I mean, in some cases, we're talking about ROI of a complete Iguazio environment of 2 weeks because of preventing the loss of revenue from those churning customers. So for me, bringing this value to our customers is priceless.
I think you gave a complete overview, and it really speaks to that Iguazio is industry agnostic, company size agnostic, and ultimately any problem that organizations are trying to use data and insights to make better business decisions, Iguazio can help. Asaf, final question from me. You and I have spoken previously about the exciting growth ahead. What are you most excited about for Iguazio looking into the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, so the way we're growing the business, our strategy is around obviously direct interaction with end users, and increasing all our customer-facing teams. And at the same time, we're also working with big partners, the cloud vendors, system vendors, on joint go-to-market, where together we're selling combined solutions and leveraging their big sales force. And that's how we're operating, and that's how we're scaling the business. We've been evolving the two sides of the business, again, the direct and the partner-based business, in a way that is great. We managed to grow the business even during the pandemic time, although we were impacted, but we did manage to grow the business. So I'm really excited about the next 12 months on how we continue to grow all the go-to-market aspects of the company.
Asaf, I really appreciate you coming on talking to us today about Iguazio. It's great to hear that there is the possibility to take so many data science and machine learning models into production, and you guys are at the forefront of that. And I know this will spark the interest of a lot of people listening who've been on the other side of working on great models but never seeing it come to fruition. So we thank you. We wish you all the best with the growth of the business, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. We really enjoyed it.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.